Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time we're talking episode 2 of season 3 of Arrow called Sara. And as the title implies, this episode is basically all about the fallout from Sara's death last episode. And I gotta say, this is a really strong episode. Whenever you do have a major character death on a show, they really almost always will do an episode immediately following that's all about the impact. And those unsurprisingly tend to vary in quality, but this is one of the best episodes like that I've seen in quite a long time. Anyway, so let's talk about some of the smaller stuff in this episode and then kind of move on to the bigger deals. Now, this time around, we don't really have, just given the nature of the episode, a lot of references to stuff from the comics. We do get a few, though. For example, they mentioned the country of Kurak, which I think has been mentioned on the show before. And Kurak is sort of basically a Middle Eastern country that's meant to be a stand-in for Iraq. If I remember correctly, I think it existed before the Gulf War, but it was basically sort of mainly used back in like the early '90s when DC Comics kind of wanted to deal with the idea of, well, how would superheroes react to something like the Gulf War? Now, remember, if you remember that the Gulf War actually happened pretty quickly, so they weren't able to quite deal with that in the most timely fashion in the comics. So they sort of had to engineer their own version of that. And there was a story in the comics where some Kuraki terrorists, sponsored by the government, staged a terrorist attack in Metropolis, and Superman got really pissed. So he flew over to Kurak and basically single-handedly destroyed their military. So yeah, that was kind of one of those things where, you know, it shows this is why you don't really go and try and pick fights with Superman. The other one I think that was pretty obvious to everyone was Felicity kind of waxing poetic about how she's not some sort of, you know, Amazon warrior princess or something like that. I don't think she actually used the word Amazon, but you know, we all kind of got where she was going with that. And you know, I don't really think we're ever going to get a Wonder Woman appearance on Arrow, but it certainly is entirely possible. There have been instances of Amazons from Themyscira either being exiled to the modern world, or even just sort of running off on their own temporarily. I've seen both of that in the comics, so I guess it's entirely possible we might see some really crazy badass fighter lady show up, you know, for a while, and then her at the end sort of toddle off with some sort of oblique reference to kind of hinting that she's from Paradise Island thrown in, or maybe her even flat out saying the word Themyscira. Although I would really be surprised if it was actually they actually used Princess Diana in that role, simply because, you know, Gal Gadot is Wonder Woman. You know, she's going to be getting her own movie. Then again, they also cast some other dude as the Flash in his own movie for later on. So, you know, really, who the hell knows what's going on with DC's legal department? The other reference I caught was Corto Maltese, which is the island where Thea and Malcolm are currently hanging out. And that's where everybody's going next episode. And this is just basically an island off the coast of South America where, you know, they can do, you know, conveniently, basically it's kind of a convenient, non-existent South American location used in the DC universe. But still, nice stuff there. Anyway, so let's kind of get into what's going on with the characters and all of that. So let's kind of start small and talk about everybody's reaction. And let's start with Roy, actually. Now, Roy was not super close with Sara, but you can see that he's obviously pretty upset about this whole situation as well. You know, Roy had picked up a little bit of training from her, and it's pretty safe to say, given how badass Sara was, that Roy had a healthy amount of respect for her. So, Roy's main thing this episode is fessing up to Oliver about what's been going on with Thea. Now, I think this is really just more a case of him helping to set up what's going to be happening next episode. But I did really enjoy that scene with Roy and Felicity, where Felicity Roy fesses up to Felicity and shows her the note, and she's like, "Yeah, you have to be the one that tells this to Oliver." And I really like how also Oliver just sort of looks at the note, goes, "Yeah, okay," and just gives it back to Roy and kind of goes on about his business. He doesn't get pissed at Roy or anything. Granted, Oliver's kind of emotionally worn down to a nub at this point, but I think this is kind of a situation. It's like, one, it's just like, okay, I've got bigger problems than this at the moment, and two, it's hard. It's kind of hard to blame Roy in this circumstances for keeping this to himself, and I think Oliver understands that in this situation, what the hell good is yelling at Roy gonna do? Now we get to see Roy in action once again, and I continue to really like the Arsenal costume. Now, one thing you might not have noticed is that on his leg, Roy has a bandolier of throwing knives, kind of with arrow-shaped heads to them. Now, again, you can't really see this very well on the show this episode, but actually, Wednesday, a couple of hours before the episode went on the air, Colton Hayes posted a picture of him in the Arsenal costume to his Twitter account, and you can see them really clearly on in that particular picture. So yeah, Roy's sporting both a bow and some throwing knives, sort of helping to cement him along the lines of him really being Arsenal. And kind of Arsenal's thing, well, one of the reasons we called him that is that he was a master of a great many weapons. But of course, in fact, for a lot of years, he was actually pretty pissed at Oliver and focused on using guns rather than arrows. Although these days Roy has basically become Red Arrow and is full on, Green Arrow the next generation. Although he stupidly has also incorporated a trucker cap into his costume, and that just looks absolutely and utterly ridiculous. But anyway, let's see. Dig. Now, this episode, again, we kind of see the impact of Sarah's death really kind of hitting home, and Dig really kind of looking at his daughter and going, God, if this were to happen to me, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine this. I'm terrified of this. And now he doesn't actually say any of this, but you can just see where he's there, just sort of, touching his newborn baby daughter. You can tell that's what's on his mind. So Dig has this, horrible situation where he has to choose between, do I do what's right or do I do what is best for my family? What's going to keep me safe so that I can be there for my child? And it's a tough situation to be in, but Dig's been a soldier. He understands that sometimes you have to go out there and put yourself on the line, even if you do have loved ones back at home. I mean, heck, my stepsister's married to a guy who used to be career Army. He got out and is now got an office job, but he's almost got himself blown up in Iraq 3 different times. And given that I really like the fact that my little nieces and nephews, I like the idea of them having a dad who's both alive and in one piece. I really respect that guy's courage for doing what he thought he had to do. So I can really kind of imagine what's going through Dig's mind there. And the one thing about it, though, is that when he says, we've decided to name her Sarah, well, I'm pretty sure parents usually tend to have a name picked out for their kids before they're born. So I can't help but imagine that that's what happened, and then after Sarah, the baby was born, and Dig found out Sarah died, he's like, Lila, look, about that name we have for our kid already, would you mind changing it? Why? Well, yeah, I mean, God, that must have been like the most awkward phone call ever. Oh yeah. Well, we'll actually get to the Hong Kong flashback in a minute, but I just really want to talk about that. I don't want to forget about that. So anyway, let's see. Felicity. Well, obviously she takes Sarah's death pretty hard because they were pretty well on their way to becoming good gal pals. But Sarah's death kind of really brings home the idea that people who run around in masks and tights, well, not exactly tights, masks and weird leather outfits, don't have terribly long life expectations, and that's just another nail in the coffin of her being able to have any sort of a real relationship with Oliver. And this kind of brings Felicity over to what's going on with her and Ray Palmer. Now, again, Felicity and Ray don't really know each other very well, and when Ray sees that Felicity is super upset, he even flat out says, like, look, I know we don't know each other very well, but if you want somebody to talk to, I'm here. And I think it's kind of hitting on Felicity that Ray is what Oliver could be if he didn't have all this angry, angsty, vigilante baggage going on. I mean, Ray's a super smart guy. He's got access to loads and loads of money, and he desperately wants to help Starling City. I mean, this episode, Ray even says, my salary for this year is going to be $1, and oh yeah, I'm going to give half of my entire fortune, half of my billions of dollars, to helping Starling City get back on its feet. So I don't think Felicity is really kind of in the romantic interest zone in regards to Ray yet. I think it's just she kind of wants some real stability. Something real, something that isn't going to end with someone she cares about dead in an alley somewhere. And that's not something that Oliver is really going to be able to provide for her. So I think it's really more like Felicity's looking for something that seems like a way to make a difference, a way to do good in Starling City, but a way that doesn't also involve people shooting and stabbing each other. And this, of course, hits home pretty hard with Oliver. I mean, he and Felicity have some great scenes this episode, and this is kind of a prime example of why it sucks to try and date Batman, or why it sucks to try and date most superheroes, but particularly the angsty vigilante types like Oliver and Bruce Wayne. And that's the great thing in the comics, and one of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, why superheroes, particularly of this type, tend to date other superheroes more than they tend to date normal people. The list of Batman's girlfriends who've ended up dead is pretty long, and yeah, I mean, there's one I was reading just a few weeks ago, and it always seems to follow a pattern. Bruce Wayne finds a girl, he's really into her, and then he's like either about to reveal that he's Batman, or he actually does reveal that he's Batman, and then shortly thereafter she ends up dead, or for some reason leaves him. And the latest girl actually got, if I remember correctly, got thrown out of a helicopter and landed on the bat signal. This, unsurprisingly, also killed her. It's just like, ooh, that's gonna get some. That's gonna bring out all the angry people on TV tropes, but well, whatever. Anyway, so we do get that great speech from Oliver where Felicity is like yelling at him, was like, Oliver, don't you feel anything? And he goes like, look, I'm the leader here. This is tearing me up inside, but everybody's looking to me to deal with this. So I can't be emotional right now. And as much as it might suck, Oliver's right. If something terrible happens on the Enterprise, the bridge crew is looking to Captain Picard to keep it together, not, Captain Picard to sit around and cry. Captain Picard can go and cry in his ready room and, pour his heart out to his little fish or whatever, but that's when he's alone. When he's in charge, when he's leading the troops, he's got to be the Rock. I mean, that's just the burden of leadership. And I like how it all culminates in that really nice scene at the end where Oliver sort of says to Dig, I don't want to die down here. Oliver realizes that he could just as easily go sit the way of Sara and die, basically kind of alone and more or less unloved. And this desire for a human connection, the desire to have the people that matter to him most, to have his sister close to him, is why he's really so obsessed over Thea this episode. But getting back to what I was saying a minute ago, I really love how Dig just sums it up. Then don't do it. And Dig's basically telling Oliver, you have the power to avert that fate. You can make changes in your life. You can still go out there and do good, but you can also still have a real life and real relationships as Oliver Queen. And I think that's kind of an example of basically what Dig is really going to do. Dig isn't going to run away from what it is that he's committed to with Oliver. Yeah, of course he's going to worry about something happening to him and leaving his daughter alone, but he also understands that what he does is extremely valuable. I mean, let's face it, Dig has basically been a big help in preventing Starling City from being completely destroyed twice. And that's not to mention all the other bad guys and terrible acts that he and Team Arrow have helped stop. So for a guy like Dig, it's not something he could just walk away from. He's going to go out there and try and find that balance. Excuse me. Let's see. Of course, this also brings us to what's going on with Laurel. And unsurprisingly, she's just a complete and utter wreck. Not so much of a wreck that she couldn't somehow get her sister's dead body from the alley over to the Arrow Cave. Man, I mean, imagine the scene of her basically having to stick Sarah's body in the trunk of her car or something. It's oh. But again, that's one of those logistic issues that doesn't really serve a useful purpose. Here you got to focus on what's really going on story-wise. And again, what's going on with Laurel is a little bit cliche. Someone loses someone in one of these stories, and they don't know who is responsible, so of course they immediately lash out at the first plausible suspect, simply because they want someone, to take revenge on. And of course, unsurprisingly, it also turns out that Komodo's not the guy. And that also leads us to the scene of Laurel, shoving a gun in his face, and Oliver going, no, don't do that. And you'd be just like him. And it is undeniably rather cliche. But I do like the idea that, one, Laurel did pull the trigger, even though Oliver did have the foresight to take the bullets out of the gun. And he even says to her, after she's pulled the trigger, "You're not like him." Now this, I think, confused some people, but I think what Oliver is saying is, now you know how it would have felt if you had pulled the trigger. And once you've calmed down and realized just what it is you would have done, it would have really hit you that you too would have been a murderer just like that guy. And that's not what you want. Now again, Oliver isn't going to put it that verbosely, but the idea is there. And of course this episode ends with us seeing Laurel sort of looking at Sarah's jacket that she gave her at the end of last season, and sort of looking pretty thoughtful. So again, one more step towards Laurel becoming Black Canary. And we also see Laurel lie to her dad about what happened with Sara, because of course she's going to do that, because Quentin needs to find out what really happened to Sara at the most horrible time in the most horrible way possible, so that he can immediately basically have a heart attack or something. Because that's what happens with good storytelling. If there's a secret that somebody's keeping from someone else, in good storytelling, they will find out, but they will find out at the worst possible time and in the worst possible way, and the consequences will be a complete and utter shitstorm. Let me see. Anything else? Okay, Hong Kong flashback. Okay, first of all, we get to see Tommy again. Yay, this is cool. Problem: Amanda Waller is an idiot. I mean, seriously, she is terrible at her job. I mean, her solution to the Mirakuru soldiers is blow up the entire city. I mean, if there's, for example, just kind of to rip a few ideas from the headlines, if there's a disease outbreak somewhere, the solution isn't nuke the city. I mean, there are more reasonable ways to contain things like this. And yeah, and here, Amanda's idea for motivating Oliver to do what basically kind of do what she wants is kill the guy who has been your best friend since childhood, or I will harm the family of a man you barely know. Now, granted, the man Oliver barely knows in question is kind of standing right next to Oliver, so awkward. But still, it's just like, sorry, dude. I mean, you have a nice house and your wife and kids seem nice, but I'm not gonna murder my best friend for them. Sorry. But on the other hand, this does push Maceo and Oliver closer together. They're kind of sort of on the road to teaming up against Amanda Waller. And that's really kind of all I have to say about that one. Of course, this episode ends with us popping over to check in on the Merlin family. Malcolm Merlin is having Thea learn kendo. Granted, that's not really how kendo matches are supposed to go. I mean, I've seen kendo matches. I have friends who've done kendo. I even used to own a bokken, the wooden sword that they use in that, when I was studying Iaido, which basically didn't last very long because the guy who was teaching me wasn't able to keep doing it, which was a real bummer. But anyway, that's not kind of how a kendo match is supposed to go. But then again, it's more about learning how to use a sword rather than doing the actual sport. Of course, kendo at the end of the day is a sport and is not a substitute for actual training with a real metal sword. But it'll get you some of the basics under your belt. So yeah, if you've seen a lot of anime and manga where like the kendo guy is like this absolute master swordsman, okay, that's bullshit. A real sword and a wooden sword are not the same damn thing, and common sense will tell you that. But anyway, Thea is looking pretty cool with the new short haircut. And if you've been paying any attention to what's been going on with Willa Holland online, she's been hitting the gym pretty seriously and is looking really, really cut. So yeah, good stuff. And I think we're all just basically waiting for Thea versus Roy, because of course it's got to happen. And again, it's just a question of how big a brick is Oliver going to shit when he finds out that Malcolm Merlin is alive? Oh, yeah, geez, we almost forgot to talk about Komodo. In the comics, Komodo is actually a much bigger player than he is here on Arrow. He's also a white guy from America here on the show. He's been changed into a black Quebecois. Not really sure why the change, but sure, what the hell. I mean, DC Comics recently changed both Adam Strange and Booster Gold into Canadians, so yeah, why not, right? And speaking of which, and I know this is silly, but when they're actually starting that motorcycle chase, just really briefly, you can actually see the Golden Arches from some Vancouver McDonald's in the background. I don't know why, but that just amuses me to no end. I mean, we see so many of the phony fast food chains in comics, I suppose it is. Like seeing an actual for real McDonald's in Starling City just appeals to me for some reason, and kind of makes me want to head over to McDonald's and get some fries. But I'm not gonna do that. Gotta try and stay healthy. But anyway. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. But anyway, I gotta say though that while I wasn't terribly impressed with Komodo as a character this episode, him and Oliver having that archery fight slash jousting match on the motorcycles was spectacular. I have never seen anything like that. I mean, it's just crazy, and I loved it. I was just like, holy crap, they're gonna have an archery fight on motorcycles. This is awesome. So, anything else we got to talk about? Nope, I think that covers it. Anyway, guys, that's all for this review. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And until next time, take care and have a good one.